though, even in that building where there was a lot of bastions of quality and people that could be screaming for quality and fight for it, the management immediately saw this as a tool to make light-colored hash out of bad weed.
That whole remediation aspect, which CRC ended up taking over, but like it was seen like that. It was seen as a cleanup crew a little bit. I thought you actually put that well.
100%. Tell us a little bit about what you did. Let's say through the 2000s, how you kept yourself alive, but then bring us into that whole how you emerged into the legal market, because as you remember, for those of us who got into it in 2000, well, at any point, but at 2009 and 2010, a lot of us were out there divulging our criminal records, in which if you had a felony, at the time, it didn't matter what the felony was. Now they've done some backtracking on that since then, and that's actually where some of the social equity has come in. But for you, you faced some unique challenges to try and get into the industry, and just tell us about how you kind of got into the legal side of it.
Yeah, so I was early when people were stacking cards. I was with, again, a really tight crew, Boulder County guys that had been doing stuff in the state forever, and varying ages. And, in 2008, I would say I didn't know anybody that wasn't a weed grower. Well, I didn't talk to anybody else. I didn't talk to anyone that didn't grow weed.
It was our heyday, man. That was the 2000 to 2010 for the black market.
Yeah.
Everybody, we all grew something different. We all grew something cool. And, we were making good money, man.
So I was pretty active on the forums back then. And
that was IC Mag, right?
Yeah, and before that, there was a couple of different ones. There was one called Couch Lock Cafe that I had a lot of really tight buddies on, that a friend made that site because we had all been on the Advanced Nutrients site early is where I met a lot of these G's.
That was like Devil's Harvest crew, Fletcher, Scott Reach. Root Cellar, a lot of those dudes.
The guys from Swamp Boys.
Yeah.
So I was more of a lurker. I talked to enough guys, but my level of paranoia was real, man. Because, and
that's what, does that and people forget about that. And people forget about that, that back then, people didn't really want anybody to know who they were. So that's why you had IC Mag and those forums
and handles so
that you could go and people wouldn't know who you are and you could talk to people.
Yeah, it was awesome to like have a free world. And through those relationships, on the forums, I met some guys in Colorado that I would not have met.
Yeah.
You cut above dudes.
Yep.
And they were young, hungry, super smart. Phil's one of the better growers in the fucking country, if not world.
100% animal.
And we started talking. And at one point, Phil was like, they opened their first store on Fillmore. And he was like, you should bring some weed down here.
This was backpack days.
Oh, those are good days.
Yeah, backpack days.
Those are good days.
They hadn't been open very long at all. Everything in the store Phil grew at that point. And it took a little bit to put it together to get me to actually do it. I was terrified. And I'll never forget, this is my first quasi-legal weed transaction. I walk into this place and I'm like, there's a couple of girls. They're very attractive and whatever, some empty shelves. And I'm like, fuck me, I'm going to jail.
Not again.
Damn it. And man, I'd known Phil online for years at this point, but I'd never seen him. And the girl takes me into the back and Phil comes walking out of yet another different back room. And I smile and take a deep sigh. And he's like, nobody's relieved when they see me. What's wrong with you? And I was like, well, I know I'm not going to jail today, buddy. He's like, you're not wrong about that. And I was like, fucking landed in a crew of guys that are real. You know what I mean? That, yeah, I could feel it on them the second I met them. And so watching them put their shit together and get a store made me rally the troops with my friends. We got a big warehouse. We built it out. We got attached to one of the early licenses because, you know, whatever that day was, August 8th, the deadline in 2010, when everybody was marrying whoever they were standing next to in line to get a license. We did that. And, you know, that's how it started for me. The thing was the only person we could get to do a license with, and this is so fortunate, was a MIP.
Right. Yep.
We had
So for those of you who don't know, that's a manufacturer's infused product.
Marijuana infused products.
Yep.
So that's a manufacturing license.
Yep.
The only
so that's extracts.
Yeah. The only cultivation you can have for that can't be flower.
Yep.
And you know, we're like, well, fucking who cares? We'll sell the flower.
Yep.
But
blessing in disguise, little did you know.
Dude's like, you're not going to be able to sell the flower eventually. You're going to have to turn this into something.
Right.
And so I had to really start thinking about what I would do. You know what I mean? Like how that would work out.
How
mechanically how that would work out. But it's funny because that was the first licensed OPC, which is an off-premise cultivation.
Yeah.
For an infused products lab, I think ever. And, you know, I figured we were open blasty, I guess, for sure.
You had done open blasting before that, obviously.
Yeah, for sure. I had immediately, as soon as the hash game started peeping up, I went right at it. And I've been making solventless for years at that point.
Right.
You know?
Well, you'd been into that hash oil game literally from the beginning.
Out of the gate.
Out of the gate.
So,
and then Jamaica reinforced that. And yeah, of course.
But I was like, how am I going to afford to sell this hash, run through that much butane, and how am I going to do it? And so I had this whole plan to
necessity is the mother of invention.
Over dry the plants and then put them in tumblers inside freezers.
Okay.
And I was going to blast that.
Okay.
And we did that. And those tubes would clog and blow up in your face, and it was terrifying and bad and all the things.
So you're thinking, okay, this may not be the way.
Well, I immediately was like, there's got to be a safer way. And there were some early closed loops that were coming out of the black market at the time, Temisium extractors. And so I fucking went out.
It's a different gas, so people understand, right?
Well, it was a brand. It was passive. Probably the first legit extractor you could buy that was for cannabis.
Okay.
And it was made for butane.
Okay.
It was strong enough.
Gotcha.
And I figured out, so I was probably one of the really, if not first, second, third guys in Colorado running any kind of closed loop. And we figured out that the hash was way better if we ran it cold.
Gotcha.
And so
then you just figure, well, how can we keep it as cold as possible, as quick as possible? I mean, because I'm seeing the progression a bit.
There was a different piece that happened then later. Where I had parked that idea about the cold because of the clogging and everything. But then there's a plant that I'm pretty well known for in the early days, this Big Papa OG, that I feel like I grew at a really high level. But man, you couldn't dry that plant and catch a tenth of what was going on in the garden.
Okay, so you were already having, whether you were able to put your tongue on it, you were already realizing and seeing that there was some volatilization that was happening. You were losing some of these terpenes you were really liking during the growth.
You wanted to explain to the listener, what.
So I couldn't dry this plant and cure it. And that I am there's not a lot of things that I'll say that I'm really good at that, but I know how to dry weed, like in any environment. And
I mean, he has dried weed in Florida, folks. If you can actually get weed dry,
you just got to be patient.
And then you got to flip here, and you got to try and keep it wet, or not wet, but If you can do both, you can do anything in between.
So I really wanted people to experience that particular strain,
right?
The way I was with it in the garden.
Yep.
And literally one day I was sitting there like probably bagging up pounds.
Sure.
And mad about it, as I always was.
Right. You already, again, had this realization that for whatever reason, and I mean, I can think of one right now that I like a lot more growing terp-wise than I do after it's dried and ready. You know what I mean?
What are you going to say?
Slurricane is the one that I'm talking about. And it's got a very, it just is much more complex for me on the plant. And then when it comes down, it's like, got kind of a sweet syrup.
Perfect.
Perfect
live resin.
And it's got oil too. Yes, in fact, it's funny. I was going to say, because I'm like, not getting what I can, not getting what was there when I was growing it.
Yeah. And I was like, honestly thinking, how many people are ever going to get what I get on the daily? Like live in the world, the cacophony of smell and texture.
Are you at Mindful at this time?
This is still before then, quite a bit. We're talking like 2010, 2011.
And I would say the only people that are going to get that level of complexity, and not necessarily in the cannabis world, but is a chef. And which is also one of the reasons why you see some of the best breeders and connoisseurs in this game, or chefs, either current or former.
What garden was that, if you don't mind me asking?
What garden was that flower from?
Yeah.
That was a 16er that I had in Broomfield.
Okay.
Which, I was just bagging up some pounds, mad about it. And I was like, so what goes away?
And why?
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 Where does the smell go away? And
where's it go to?
I'm like, I'm drying it, right?
Right.
Like, so we obviously have volatile smell.
Super volatile compounds.
I was like, so if I can keep the water in it and extract it, can I get it all? And
I
happen to know the boiling point of butane. And
I just so happen to know.
And the freezing point of ice. And that all happened in like a Tetris moment.
And it literally went like this.
Yeah, I was like, holy shit, I can freeze this stuff and blast it with butane. Butane won't melt the ice. I can keep the water out and just get hash.
Aha moment.
And I tried it. And it was terrible.
Yes.
It was this green. It was this green bullshit.
That's so
that
funny.
is, you're expecting this crescendo moment.
I was like,
it was awful.
It was terrible.
I did know I was right.
But you knew, like, just chemically speaking, you were like, but I know this should work. And there's got to be a way to get it to work.
Yeah, absolutely. And
this is, just to be clear, this is the live resin moment, folks. This is
so
just almost 10 years ago. So we're talking 2014, roughly October-ish.
2013.
Yeah. So this first time is still like
13. Sorry,
2011. And then I had a garden that I was partners on, somewhere up north. It'll go easy. You know what I mean? I'm not going to trim the weed, but I will make sure the trimmers are fed right and don't have to stop working and that it's a cool environment.
Right.
All of those things that were important. And enough hippie in me, I was like, hey, this is the last time to put any good vibe in the weed. I want the trimmers to be happy. So I tried the thing again. And this time I fucking threw the butane in the freezer with the tubes that I packed.
In the freezer?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you froze everything.
Everything.
Yeah. And I made a couple of grams of the purest white extract I've ever seen. Blew my goddamn mind.
Holy shit.
On the front step of this house in the middle of nowhere where we're about to trim.
That's live. That's the first real live resin, pretty much.
So that was the first time I knew. I was like, okay, this works. The reality is you don't get any hardly because of the volume that wet weed is versus dry. And it just wasn't commercially tenable. But everybody was smoking dabs of the same weed that they were trimming, like the exact same run.
And at this point, people have been smoking shatter. Like people, I mean, hash was a thing. Now you're refining it and really honing it in.
Nick was already making some good solventless. Yep. There was a couple guys, there was ice hash. There was we were making really, really good dry butters back then. You know what I mean?
Yep.
I was never a fan of shatter until they made me do it when I came in industry. But so that I brought that and I showed Dan, Big Dan, the guy that did the Secret Cup, that was early, that brought shatter to Colorado.
Right.
And he was, that looks like shit. I was like, who cares? Smell this. And he was like, you're not wrong. So
who cares? Smell this.
I had it in my head that I could do it. I needed to figure out a way to commercialize. I think of myself to have a pretty good mechanical mind. I play with cars and did a lot of construction in my role years. So I just started thinking about it. Fast forward 2013 and at 2012, I meet Giddy Up from Emotech Labs. And again, same conduit, the Cut Above guys were invested in on his early company. We became friends immediately. And I had been running his machine a little bit with him, making shatter and whatever for Cut Above and not even paying attention. And one day I was looking at the vessel, storage vessel on the machine, like the stamp on it. It had a temperature rating on it. I was like, you can make this thing minus 30? He's like, why would you want to? I was like, no, will it break it?
No.
You know what I mean? Is it going to break if we freeze it? No. He's like, I don't understand why you want to. And I was like, just follow along, buddy. And then we talked Phil into, again, Phil, a Cut Above Phil, not Philip Haig. We talked Phil into giving us some material, which he actually had saved for Nick T to wash. It was trim. And we were going to enter it in the very first 710 cup. It didn't come out of the oven the way I wanted it to. It was really the best shatter anybody had seen at that point. But it wasn't the flavors that I made into the butters that I had made previous and in experimentation.
Because the whole point of live resin is it tastes like what you smelled when you walked in there. That's what you're casting.
Yeah, you're trying to translate it.
It's like flat,
like to be in a living garden.
Yeah, right, it's like flash freezing anything.
Hence live.
That's resin. Why the name.
Right.
So but the clock started ticking then. That's June 2013. I'm trying to help sell these Emotech machines. I'm talking to everybody. I'm like, man, you got to get on the closed loop. It's safe. You can make so much hash.
The fire department's kind of demanding it in Denver, not for nothing.
Well, I mean, and let's just be honest. It makes sense.
Yeah, we opened the first C1D1 lab in the country down there in the Springs to be able to show the machine. A lot of cool stuff. And through that, Philip Haig was watching me. And he was like, man, we need a hash company at this new grow that I'm moving to, which ended up being Mindful.
Yeah.
And so I had some meetings with the owners, and it literally took 20 minutes to talk them into this. And maybe after 6 weeks of making hash for them, I talked them into freezing a bunch of plants. And what was a bunch to them, right?
And I remember.
But that's a big leap. I mean, even when I've froze whole plants, that I'm just like, but just that first time, it's all tough.
But just so you understand, though, too, I walked that garden in 2016 or 15 because I actually got a bunch of genetics off of Phil. And at the time, it's funny because it's across the street from a police station. But at the time, it's 44,000 square feet. It really was one of the first legal monster grows in the country, in which they really, they were the first ones. We talk about these things. They were one of the first guys that were running the DEs. Sure. Phil was Phil was doing some revolutionary shit that as far as what cannabis was. And so for them, they were actually getting to the point where they had some excess material where it was like, okay, let's throw some shit at the wall and see what happens.
Experiment, you know, and eventually, you hopefully get to a point where you can.
Yeah. So the secret cup was coming up and I was like, man, we got to enter this thing.
Let's get in there.
Let me make my thing. And we were literally calling it that. Let me just do my thing. And let me figure out. I was obsessed with making it stable then because everybody wanted shatter.
Yeah, because it would wax. That was the big problem back then. Was it was unstable.
So Philip talked the owners into letting me and him walk the garden, and we were able to pick I don't remember how many plants it was, maybe 30 total plants. That would be the best representation of this. And so we harvested Colorado Flow.
Oh, I loved that girl.
Big Papa OG. Chem D. ECPC, which was East Coast Panama Chunk.
Yep.
And then Trace Star.
Yep, the Trace Star. That was a great one too.
Trace Star ended up being the first run that we did in a closed loop that worked. And that was October 14th, 2013.
Day after my birthday.
And history was
feel the love.
And
created.
My life got taken over immediately. I was such an obsessive gardener at that time, but I was doing whatever I could to work because I couldn't get a badge.
Right.
Even though, and I couldn't really I couldn't work in a garden under Philip. You know what I mean? It doesn't make sense. Number one, how many guns do you need? And who's going to pull? And honestly, the guy is so much more technical than me and so much more of an overall plantsman ag guy.
Right.
I couldn't carry the guy's holster at that time.
He grew up doing it with his family. And
they were poinsettia folks. Yeah.
So
he had a great background for that reason.
Right. And we had shared plans. He really wanted me to participate though on the ride. So he was like, fuck this, let's make a hash lab. And we started TR Scientific, and, Grassroots built a product category.
Yeah. No, 100%.
Nobody wanted it.
Yeah.
They were like, that is the ugliest shit. And it didn't look like the thing they were used to.
Right. Well, that's the thing. It was different. That was the biggest issue at the time. And it's really not an issue, but that's what the issue that people had.
Right. So, but that's kind of how we got to modern extracts, let's say.
Yeah, 100%. So take us through, live resin to what, because it's definitely, I think this is one of the things I always touch on, but it's definitely evolved in the 10 years that live resin has existed. So why don't you help us our listeners understand a little bit, because for a long time there were a bunch of extract companies. Rosin wasn't quite what it is now. Our friend Nick has definitely helped refine that process, especially, and Pele Pilar, a bunch of other dudes. It's not like it's just Nick, but there's a bunch of dudes who've refined that process where, especially with the freeze drying, I think that was a big part of it, because for a while there, rosin was kind of, harsh, we'll say. And at the same time, while rosin had been making a rise, live resin, butane, had gotten the moniker of kind of the cleanup crew, because it had really become the remediation tactic for a lot of folks. But now,
good point.
We've it's kind of coming back around. So why don't you help our listeners and the people who are watching kind of understand, how it started, where it's come, and realistically almost like where you see it, because there's a lot of things that we talk about as far as it being a superior solvent. So let's kind of dive into that a little bit.
Yeah, I'd love to. So it started conceptually to be that top cut, that unobtainium, the best thing, which meant best plants, best practices, the level of care and speed and thorough plan, like the execution on harvesting these plants was blowing people's minds. They thought it was a simple thing. We really cared so much, and we were definitely trying to make the best thing.
Oh, dude, I've had it where my teams were harvesting directly into the socks and going directly into freezers. So 100%.
What happened though, even in that building where there was a lot of bastions of quality and people that could be screaming for quality and fight for it, the management immediately saw this as a tool to make light colored hash out of bad weed.
That whole remediation aspect, which CRC ended up taking over, but like it was seen like that. It was seen as a cleanup crew a little bit. I thought you actually put that well.
100%. And it's unfortunate because a lot of guys like myself and Bill, that original intention, like he said, it got bastardized.
Sure. So, and that happens.
We would walk these rooms like I was telling you on the drive down here. There were some big rooms in that Mindful building, and you walk a row of 500 ChemD plants or even 100. There's this very small percentage of any clone grown in an environment that are superior to the others. And that's what we made live resin out of. The very best plants in the room. And it was an easy argument for me to have. They're like, why do you have to have the best plants? And I was like, because they don't make it through the post-processing, the dry, cure, trim, package, send to store.
It's all the same shit at the end.
By the time it gets to store, it's all the same shit. I can make this into something special. Just let me do it. And
I can get you your dollar for it.
Right. And that was why we were able to sell $100 grams for a couple of years. You know what I mean? Because we were super strict about what got frozen was the best thing in the room that it came out of. Not just the favorite strain, the best expression of that plant that we could get. And we were in the building. Our lab was in a massive grow. Nobody else really had that in the beginning.
Yep.
The material handling when it wasn't us was obvious in the product.
In which everybody would give you their material and expect you to turn it into what you're making in your own building. And you're like, look, I know
the quality of herb.
Well, not just that, I know the process it's going through.
Sure.
Yeah. You know what I mean?
And everything's in-house. You're not moving it from, even the process of moving out of the freezer into a cooler, onto the whatever site. How long does it take till it gets blasted? There's a lot of factors to that. When you're doing all in-house, like you're saying, you were harvesting into socks to throw into the freezer. You know what I mean?
And honestly, the reason we even developed that process was because of all the things we had seen over time. Bill and I were looking at material earlier today, as far as crunching it up to throw up. And like anytime you have to do extra processes, it's gonna screw with the integrity of the product.
Right. Well, and first off, this has been incredibly interesting, and I really do hope that everybody's gotten some out of this. And this is part of literally we're trying to bring some of these stories to light, and this has been incredibly enlightening to me. And in fact, you've done an amazing job just naturally going through a lot of the questions that I had highlighted just as a kind of a part of your story. For example, I read, what was your biggest failure and what did you learn from it? I think we covered that. But I did want to pull a couple off of here, before we get out of here. And one of them that kind of popped out of me is, what is one common myth about your profession that you'd like to debunk? Is there anything about that? And I have a feeling I might even know where, like, even with the hydrocarbon thing that we were talking on the way down. But anyway, is there with what you're doing and being that we don't look at it as cleanup anymore?
Right.
What do you think?
So I'm going to preface this with and this is especially true within cannabis, there's infinite ways to do anything. There's and not necessarily right or wrong, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So with BHO or solventless, There are good players. There are obsessives.
Sure.
There are people that can't tell the difference between, A and B and everything in between. So to be like BHO is dirty. This is the common myth.
Right. And this is, yes.
Or that rosin is cleaner.
Or that rosin is cleaner is as absurd of a statement as any absolute blanket across a bunch of individuals, right?
That alone is a bold move to blanket anything. Okay. Bold move.
But here's the thing that most people don't understand. Why I chose to be doing a whole plant, fresh, frozen, and butane extraction. And it's chemistry. It's just simple science stuff. It's a light hydrocarbon. Monoterpenes are largely light hydrocarbons. These things are very similar.
Mm-hmm.
And knowing, I'm a gas chem. The way that I go flavor wise, there isn't a good solventless representation. Never was, and I was growing that. You
were very familiar with that.
I smoked Bubba Kush, Bubble.
GMO comes out pretty decent, but I think we could all agree that the column of plants that washes is much narrower than the column of plants that blasts.
Right. It just doesn't even.
There's a ton of stuff that doesn't wash. That's really cool.
Right.
Yeah.
And then there's
green crack,
water solubility reasons, terpenes. There's a lot of reasons. Right?
Sure.
That I can control exactly how a live resin extraction goes. I can control the contact time. I can control the temperature. I can control the pressure. I can control everything.
Right.
And it's done in an actual laboratory at this point. These are really clean environments.
Right.
We have, I personally don't use any of the modern filtration. I think that has its place.
You're talking the CRC.
Yeah. Color remediation.
Yeah.
Even people are like, oh, it's not CRC. I just use a little NewMill. Cool. That makes really beautiful hash and it has a place.
Right.
It takes green flavor out and it does a lot of things. My whole thing is like having impeccable process, which comes down to actually honoring this plant that's given me everything that I've ever had in my life. Period.
Wow.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I do.
I'm like, this thing takes care of me,
So this has been a lifelong endeavor of to honor the plant in reality.
Yeah. I'm trying to do it right and do right by this most amazing thing,
Wow. That gave me goosebumps.
And anybody that knows me well enough knows that isn't true. That I get out of bed for her and to get people high.
Thank you.
When it's a dark, hard day in the lab, and the guys are grinding.
Right.
I'm like, hey guys, getting motherfuckers high out there.
And a lot of them. And
that's how we push through it.
Great answer. I love that answer. I'll segue that. And this could be cannabis, not cannabis, whatever. It's kind of a blanket question. What are you proudest of?
Easy. I am proudest of the guys that have come up under me.
Mm-hmm.
Why did I know that?
I like that.
Well, it's funny though. I knew that was going to. What
that gets me
say.
A little like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I automatically think of Dan. I automatically think of Dan at Natty.
Yeah.
I think of guys like Tamir.
So you're proud of the information and the mentoring and the love and the passion that you've been able to not only use in your own career and your own individual endeavors, but also what you've been able to instill with the people that you've that have worked under you and that you've worked with.
And just that, like, I managed to inspire a small group of exceptional people
That's something to be very proud of.
That
How
really went out into the world and did some amazing things.
How much?
You know what I mean?
Because we were talking about this a couple of weeks ago. How much money's worth of live resin has been made under the tutelage of people that you have trained in the world?
If you include carts, it's a little over $1 billion.
So
okay,
$1 billion.
This decade.
$1 billion in this decade.
This decade, folks.
Worth of,
we don't have records from before that.
That true.
We don't.
True.
We just
we
don't
didn't
have,
keep.
We don't have
we didn't
BS. But since 2020, we're at 1.3 bill into market in 21 markets in this country.
Of some of Bill's tech in some way. I mean, again,
right.
You know, you look at Massachusetts. Massachusetts is a 0 parts per million market, which means,
Sure.
you know, you pretty much need to have no butane in there. Bill helped work on one of the first licenses that actually was able to produce
that
0
product.
parts per million.
That
So
product.
that's a huge legacy. Huge legacy.
What kind of coupling on that? What do you believe your future holds? What does the future hold for you, Bill?
More live resin.
more
You know,
live resin, more refining of the process.
You could just tell people now a little splurge of what you've been working on.
I am working on launching Bill in Colorado.
Hell yes.
We could squeak into market before year's end.
Yeah.
Be really looking for us on the 420 ramp up.
Excellent. Excellent. Be watching for that, folks. That's a tidbit that has not been released previous to this moment. So at least publicly.
Yeah. You know, me and Gabe been talking about, you know, this thing is great and it inspired people and it just needs to be executed the way that this team that I have built around me, that we can do it. And these guys, you know, have exceeded my ability to impact this industry and this plant. Like the guys that have been with me the whole time are on a different level than me now.
Well, and we continue to prove, you know, I mean, you know, truth be told, you were a long time New Millennium user and supporter, you know, primarily because it does do well with oils and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's an oil producer.
You know, took us till the end of the show, but we got a little plug in there. Hey.
Well, and you know
we are dealing jugs here,
but what I will say is, you know, you are 100% correct. The team of people that you deal with, that you surround yourself with, Rye, Phil, both Phils, a lot, you know, to me are a lot of the gang that you are involved with. Nick, they're all involved with doing something special and exceptional and highlighting the fact that we don't all grow the same.
Right.
You know, there's a lot of people doing a lot of stuff, but we want it to be where you come out of ours and you're like, wow, that was an experience. That wasn't just me smoking hash or me eating food or me doing any of these things. We want it to be an experience.
Well, and you consume in multiple ways, which is one of the reasons I do love, you know, extractions in that way, because it does allow you to consume in those three traditional ways. With your eyes first, it's a beautiful product.
Right.
Then with your nose, and you're getting that very beautiful and amazing translation of a live growing plant, hence live resin. And then the taste, you're getting that same thing. You're getting that translation that very, very closely coincides to what you're smelling. And we know, like, as cannabis users and food and stuff, like, you want that to match. When it doesn't match, it's like, even if it's good, but it doesn't match, it's weird.
I'll tell you what, when it does match, I'll never forget the first Herb Quest that Rye had, where, you know, I want to say you provided the live resin. Rye we did a fresh frozen juice, for cold pressed juice that they nitrogen froze. So they made a little ice cream and they paired it.
Fancy.
They paired it with the different hashes, and they did a green crack paired with watermelon. And I remember at the time I hated green crack flower. And when I did that pairing,
something happened.
Like a light, like all of a sudden I was like, there's a kid I used to work with. And when the first dab I ever gave him, he goes, I've been living my life all wrong till right now. That was how I felt.
Yep.
You know, and it was just one of those things. And so sharing that experience. And that's what you've always been about, is sharing. Hey, I tried this. This was great. I want to share this experience with everybody.
Let me be clear. There's two types of people in the world. There's people that keep that kind of thing to themselves, and there's people that put it out there. And there's also two types of people in the world. There's people that are proud of the people that have tootled under them and went and done bigger and better things. And there's people that aren't. And we've all come across those two people. And the former rather than the latter is a much better person, a much more humble and much more real person. So I really found that answer awesome, actually, that's what you're proud of, is the people that came up under you. I thought that was an amazing answer. Okay. Couple more little things. If you could interview anyone from your life, living or dead, who would it be and why? So interview anybody from history, period. Who would you want to interview? Maybe that's a whole nother episode.
I'm going to go Pininfarina.
Okay.
Nice.
Okay.
For those who don't know, he's an Italian body maker for cars.
I knew we were going to get really
French?
Interesting. I knew we were not going to get what I would have guessed or anything else. So
he designed some of the most beautiful Ferraris ever.
He drew all the cars that turned my brain on when I was a kid.
Gotcha. Love it. What an answer.
I wanted to be a car designer.
Okay. And you said that early on, BMX drawing and reading, right? I mean, that was pretty much.
And so, I have been a car obsessive. I see them as art. I, wavered as a teenager as to whether I would actually just go to art school or not.
Sure.
I never thought I was good enough. I am an obsessive. So, being an artist, actively arting is a reasonably painful process for me. Although I do love doing it.
Right.
But
well, you just found you found a different art. What you're doing and your obsessiveness and all that, and which process is incredibly important in things like hash making or food and things like that, like we were talking about as well, So, wow, very interesting answer. And I also love how we've got to see a little bit about where your mind was from and how that would make sense that some of these things would come together at some point. Right.
Right.
Okay. Last but certainly not least, is there anything that you would like to be asked? Do you have any parting wisdom? Is there any last things you'd like to put out to the community? Again, thank you very much for coming by. This has been very interesting for me. I hope it's been very interesting for the community as well. Also let them know where they can find you at if anybody has, because I have a feeling there might be some people that have additional questions. So go ahead.
Yeah. So, I can't think of something else I want to impart right now other than, when you're doing the thing that turns you on, just do that. Just keep showing up. Just do it.
Just do it.
And don't care. And then lean in on it and just keep showing up. Keep showing up. If your thing that gets you fired the hell up, that you're stoked for, doesn't hurt anyone else, it's probably the thing that's going to feed you.
It's probably what's going to keep your cup full for your life. And as far as your passion goes, I think that's great advice. And I would also say you can find him at Kindbill, KINDBILL on Instagram. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay. So thank you very much, everybody. Welcome to the new. We finally got our thing. Welcome to the New Jugs Dealers Podcast. Be looking for all kinds of things coming your way from us, including websites, stickers, banners, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Thank you very much.